I don't ever have that big idea like wizard school, you know, like I never had that idea. I'm waiting for it, you know, like J.K. Rowling keeps describing like I was on a train and the whole story came to me and I'm like, that must be nice. Or like I was flying in my private jet to America to promote the last Harry Potter book and I had this idea for a book. I was like, what? How does that work? No, I have very small ideas, and so I write my very small ideas, and I try to connect them, and then they become a bigger idea. But I don't outline. There are as many ways to write a book as there are books, and so there's no right way. There are some wrong ways, but I don't think there's a right way, and I don't think there's, you know, I certainly don't advocate for my way of doing it, and I'm interested to hear the way these guys do it, because maybe I can switch. But the way I do it is I have these little ideas, I have these characters, I have this feeling, and I write a story that's like as long as a book, and then I send it, I ask my wife to read it, which she does reluctantly, and I ask my editor to read it, and then I delete either all of it or almost all of it. So maybe 5,000 words will survive from the 60,000 words that I wrote. And that process of writing a first draft is my outlining. That's me discovering the characters and figuring out what should happen and figuring out what shouldn't happen, and, you know, walking down all the wrong plot places that I need to walk down to get to the better ones. And so I spend, you know, 6 months or a year writing that draft, and then I delete all or most of it, and then I sort of work again with what I've discovered along the way, sort of serving as signposts or guideposts to me as I write the second draft, and then that draft is the one that I can really work from.
A couple years ago, I interviewed about 25 novelists for a book that I did with a friend called Novel Ideas, which was so wonderful and so instructive to me in so many ways. But some people did seem to be more organized than I, and so I decided that I would try to be more organized. So I wrote this very elaborate outline. It took me like 6 weeks or something for the book that actually just came out this week called An American Tune. So when I felt that I had sufficiently gotten control of everything that was going to happen in this book, I started writing, and when I got to chapter 2, this red-haired girl came bursting into the book. Her name was Bridget, and she would not leave. So I simply abandoned the outline and went with Bridget, and it was a good decision. I sometimes try to make outlines in the middle. I mean, I think there are lots of things that you can do along the way that, and I wouldn't really call them outlines either. It just, you know, kind of trying to get sequence down and to figure out what needs to be there and what doesn't. So I'm a back and forth sort of person, and I will never start with an outline again, but I do sometimes need to sort things out somewhere in the middle or at the end of the draft. I have some kind of cool, really anal retentive ways of looking at what I have and trying to figure out what's wrong with it. So no more outlines for me.
Before I wrote my first novel, I'd written 3 nonfiction books, but my great dream was to write a novel. And in fact, after my first nonfiction book, I wrote 50 pages of a novel. My agent sent it to the publisher, and I was in New York. The publisher was Houghton Mifflin in Boston, and they told my agent, we'll pay for him to come to Boston and take him to lunch at this fancy restaurant. And I said to my agent, is that good or bad? He said, it could be either. So it turned out to be bad. As we're having lunch at this fancy restaurant, the editor-in-chief of Houghton Mifflin says, well, Dan, we've read these 50 pages, and you know, we think you're a wonderful young journalist. I was young then, but we think you're not a novelist. That, you know, I later thought about that. What the hell? They couldn't just say they didn't like this 50 pages. They said, you're not a novelist. So I sort of wrote under cover of darkness, you know. And the thing that hung me up about writing the novel was I couldn't figure out how you handle time. How do people write novels about a course of somebody's life? How do you go through all those years? So it finally came to me that I could have these 2 characters who come home to Indianapolis after they've been in the Army, and they get home in June, and they leave in September. I thought, okay, I can handle that. That's just 3 months. And that really sort of freed me up. So it's weird what little things, you know, can do. But I don't know. I think it's just about, the only thing is to know, sort of have a general idea of how it's going to end. I mean, I knew these guys were going to come home and they were going to leave. That was about the only outline. Yeah. Yeah.